And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Payson Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, September 11th, 2023, 8 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Cinemasters Reviews. A big review show this week. We have three movies we will be reviewing. We will be reviewing The Nun 2, the latest entry in the Conjuring universe. Bottoms, the newest film by Emma Seligman, as well as her second collaboration with Rachel Sennett, and My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, the third entry in the My Big Fat Greek Wedding franchise. And joining me to review two of these movies, the one, the only, the host of Why We Love Horror. You can watch him on the video store on this very channel. It is Calamity John Marr. John, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good, Payson. Thanks for finally having me on the show. I appreciate it. I'm glad that we've seen most of the movies together this week, so I am excited to talk about these movies. I have strong opinions on both movies, so I'm looking forward to get into that.
Very excited to hear that. But yeah, I say we just jump into our first review tonight, and that is the movie that made the most money at the box office this week, The Nun 2. This is the sequel to the first Nun released in 2018. This sequel directed by Michael Chaves. This one we are following the same character played by Tasha Farmiga. She is now studying to be a nun. We follow some new characters as she's going to monastery school. And would you look at that? Some horror aspects starts going down. John, what did you think about the first Nun movie as a standalone movie? And also, what has been your opinions on the Conjuring universe as a whole? Don't go into like your opinion on each film one by one, but just like as a whole, what has been your opinion?
Conjuring universe is kind of all over the place quality-wise. I mean, a lot of people love the core Conjuring stories. I think a few others outside of the Conjuring universe core are pretty strong. The Nun, however, just to me, it seems like the producers, whoever is the people who are gunning for the Nun, they seem to craft their stories from like, here are the jump scares we want to put into a movie. Let's make sure we hit all these notes, and you guys build a story around it. And I think that starting from that point of view kind of really hurts the sub-franchise of The Nun, because that seems to be all they have. Is you see a lot of the hot points in the trailers, and then it's like, how do they connect these dots? And they're not really doing a great job so far.
Yeah, I share roughly the same thoughts as you. I've been kind of hit or miss on the Conjuring franchise. I think there are definite highs, there are definite lows. I think making The Nun into a standalone film was always like a strange choice because like The Nun is introduced in The Conjuring 2, and you maybe have like 10 minutes with her in total, and then they were like, oh, people really latched onto this. Why don't we make an entire movie around that? And then, yeah, like you said, it just became like jump scare central with that first Nun. I don't remember like a ton about that first movie, except like there's a scene where the nun like spits the blood of Christ onto one of the characters, and I was like, wow, that's kind of wild. But yeah, didn't have the most positive thoughts about that first Nun, and I'll be honest, I didn't have the most positive thoughts about the sequel either. I thought it was fairly unnecessary, and as I was watching this movie, I think my main takeaway was, wow, this movie is an hour and 50 minutes, and it's about as uneventful as I think you can make a horror movie. John, what were your like general thoughts on The Nun 2? And did you also think, wow, there's really not a ton going on in this movie?
I don't exactly agree with that. I think just going back to build a base, obviously, like you said, Valak was introduced in The Conjuring 2. I think another one of it's a weird pitfall for like a horror franchise to fall into is they don't really establish Valak in The Conjuring. It's kind of like an anomaly, the demon Valak. And then with each progressive movie, they've changed the mythology around Valak to the point that like I don't even really know what Valak is supposed to be. And they don't really do a good job in The Nun 2 either, outside of literally the characters literally speculating. Well, I think this, well, I think that. So you're left with even more questions that you don't even care about at the end of this third time seeing the movie. As far as how do I feel about it? Yeah, there's jump scares. I don't personally, I think if you read my review on Letterboxd, I think jump scares are cheap. If jump scares are horror, my daughter is the most frightening person in the world, you know. So basically, it's not a horror. There's no real horror. Like you said, do things happen? Sure. Is there a plot? Yes. Does anything happen? I don't know. They kind of patchwork a bunch of stuff together. There's like a Mean Girls subplot in here. Like, Demjin Bashir's character is gone with no fanfare. They add new characters that I don't really care about. It was weird. It was a weird experience. Scary, though? Not really.
Yeah, I think you really tackled on to one of the main negative sides of this movie, and that is this movie is just jump scare the movie. Like, there are about 1 billion jump scares, and that is mainly the only real way it seems to be able to establish terror or horror in any way. And yeah, like you said, like usually when there are like maybe like 2 or 3 in a horror movie, I'm like, okay, you know what, you earned it. There's a way to do them well. But when there's something like this where there's just one after another, and they're just followed by like scenes of just like nothing really happening, except like you said, you'll have just subplots with characters we don't really care about. This movie adds Storm Reed from A Wrinkle in Time. This movie adds, I forget the actress' name, but like the woman who played Susan Pevensey in the Chronicles of Narnia movies, or it just randomly shows up in this movie. She plays one of the moms to the students that is studying to be a nun at this school, and she shows up. And yeah, you follow like these subplots with these characters. Yeah, like you said, there's this really stupid like Mean Girls storyline where like one of the new main girls, they just start bullying her and like trapping her in rooms where like, like, okay, the second we get trapped in a room, I wonder what's going to happen. Oh, would you look at that, another jump scare. And it's just really tough to get like invested in any way.
Bullying the teacher's daughter with no repercussions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. I just want to let the audience know, in case they didn't know, Valak is the name of the demonic nun that is essentially the villain of this movie. The movie doesn't really do a great job at explaining that. I think it kind of expects you to remember certain things about either the first nun or other entries in the Conjuring universe. I'll get into this later as to why I'm just not a fan of that. But yeah, that does happen. Tasha Farmiga is the only actress that returns in the main plot of this film, who was one of the main characters in the first film, and she's still studying. She's essentially now has become like a full registered nun, and is essentially there to try and maybe not exorcise the monastery, but definitely like, hey, something's going on here. We need your help. And I'll be honest, I can't really.
She's kind of like, she's like low key in hiding.
Yeah, she's definitely in hiding, and some of the and she like sort of befriends some of the characters. I don't remember a ton from her character in the first movie. This movie doesn't really do a lot to like remind you of stuff. I think it's just because I think the character's a little one note. What did you think about Tasha Farmiga in this movie, John?
I think it is probably the most consistent thing in this movie is the character of Sister Irene. So like, in the first movie, she's a novitiate. She's not really a nun, but they realize she has this kind of like mystical, clairvoyant kind of spirituality to her. And that's why they tie her to Demian Bashir's character to go to Romania in the first movie. Then like all the stuff that happens in the first movie happens. She almost dies. She's resuscitated. Now she's just like shell shocked. She's just a regular nun trying to keep a low profile to the point that people talk about her in front of her, and they don't know that it's her. And then but then the cardinal comes in. He's like, you're back in the game. And then the other returning character we do have Frenchie who comes back, Jonas Bloquet from the first.
Oh yes,
he's there, and he doesn't have much to do besides act like he has PTSD half the time, and then act like the friendliest big dude the other half of the time. So a weird two-note character. I kind of got sick of him by the end of the movie because, to be honest, if you've seen The Nun, in the mid-credit scene in The Nun, you see him in the future being exorcised by the Warrens in America. So, and that never happens in The Nun 2. So the whole movie, in the course of it, like you don't even get to that point. Not that that's a real spoiler, just letting you know, like this is an interim story. There's more to come.
Yeah, I just want to. We can tackle this now. what even is this universe as a whole at this point? Like, because we have the Conjuring universe, and we have the Annabelle films, and we have the Nun movies, and I believe the Curse of La Llorona is also technically in this universe as well. And this isn't really a spoiler for the movie. This movie does have a post-credit scene where you see the Warrens again in the future to I guess tease the Conjuring 4. And just as I'm watching this movie, I'm like, are these movies even connected at this point? Like, are these franchises connected at this point? And if so, what really is the point? If I were making these movies, I'd just say, look, I'm just gonna take these franchises and I'm just gonna make go off and do their own things. Like, John, do you really think we need like a cinematic universe at this point with all these different horror creatures?
Do we need it? No. Has the horse left the stable? Yes.
Fair.
I mean, and they've already even the Curse of La Llorona. There is no connection to the Warrens. It's a character from Annabelle, which is connected to the Warrens. It's in the Curse of La Llorona. So you're already 2 steps away, but it's still in the same universe. They've had other projects that they've kind of introduced within the universe. Like there was supposed to be a Crooked Man movie from The Conjuring 2. I believe that was scrapped. And there's a few other things that they're working towards. But obviously, I think you're right. Like, this is a Valak art. Valak is the Thanos in this universe. And, the story is not done yet, even though Valak had, if you've watched The Conjuring 2 and you've watched The Nun, Valak has been summarily defeated twice.
Yes.
We don't even understand how do you beat Valak. Like, it's never explained and nobody knows, which is kind of like a weird pitfall for a horror franchise to have. Usually either it's like an interminable evil or the villain has a weakness. Valak is neither.
Yeah, even towards the end of this movie where slight spoilers, I guess, Valak is defeated, and by defeated I mean the good guys are able to thwart them, but Valak can just one day just show up again, as we know they see them again in The Conjuring 2. At one point, I'm just like, well, what is the stakes and why should I care in this universe when you've already established that this monster can just show up at any single point, even when it seems like it's defeated? And it makes it very hard for me to really get invested in these sorts of stakes. I want to talk about the direction by Michael Chaves. I don't believe I've seen any Michael Chaves films before. And I'll be honest, the direction in this movie didn't really impress me, especially towards the third act. I think the third act where essentially a lot of stuff finally starts happening, where the characters have to start fighting Valak, where they have to, where they're separated, where there are now more threats happening. I just found it kind of cluttered. I think it was kind of shoddily edited. You can't really see a lot what's going on. I think there is something to be said about in horror movies where you can't really see what's going on, because often that's kind of an artistic choice. But I think when you literally cannot see what's going on, I think you kind of have an issue. And that's kind of what I felt like in the third act, especially. In the first 2 acts, I definitely thought it was just more of okay, this definitely has dreary lighting, but that's definitely more of an artistic choice. But by the third act, I'm like, what is going on when Valak is chasing the main characters and also chasing another character that there's an incredibly, in my opinion, predictable reveal where we learn that Valak might be possessing someone. The second we learned about this, I'm like, well, geez, I wonder who's going to be the one to be possessed. What did you think about the direction and more specifically the third act or anything else I said, John?
Well, I believe it might be Michael Chavez, I think is his name. And this is actually the third movie in the Conjuring universe that he's directed. He directed The Curse of La Llorona, he directed The Devil Made Me Do It, and he directed this. So
well, I've seen all.
He's well seasoned in what they expect. I honestly can't blame him because I enjoyed La Llorona more than most people did. Devil Made Me Do It was fine. The Nun is just a difficult franchise to tackle. I think the writers or whoever is developing the storyboard people, whoever they are I think they refuse to budge on these are the set pieces we need to hit. And when you're given that kind of task, it's just difficult because they clearly had a dozen jump scares they needed to get in, and you needed to just force this movie into each thing. So maybe it's not his failing. I think he was just given a very heavy load to carry.
Yeah, I think I think I definitely agree with what you said, where I think I think the nun, unfortunately, it's not the most rich character or the most rich like villain, especially in the film that's set up.
It could be.
Yeah, it could be. But you as the director has to put a lot more into this, like into that character, and I just don't think I just don't think any of the writers have really done it up to this point. You kind of alluded to earlier that there was a Crooked Man script that was scrapped. I personally would be really interested to see like what a solo film with that character would be like, because that to me sounds really, really interesting. I know I've been tackling a lot of the negatives of this movie, but there are some solid elements, specifically some of the technical designs. I think the production design in this movie is excellent, and I think when you like can see what you're looking at, I think you can see all the details being done where you're looking at France in the 1800s, and you're going through these churches and you're going through these schools. What did you think about the production design as a whole, John?
Yeah, I think the whole it's a repurposed monastery. That it was a monastery, it was a vintner. Now it's a school for girls who are a Catholic school for girls, essentially. And then you have that part of the building where the monk went mad and the chapel was destroyed. The one lady's son died there. That whole set of the chapel under construction is probably the best set piece in the entire thing, because so much of the action happens there, and they actually incorporate a lot of that construction equipment into a lot of the aspects of the movie. And I believe this movie is, if it's set between The Nun and the exorcism we see at the end of The Nun, that places this, I think, in the mid to late 1960s. Is when this is taking place in this movie.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
So that, obviously, but it's obviously in a rural countryside of France. So, it feels older than it is.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels. I think I was mistaking it, because I think at the beginning of the movie you do see a scene that does take place in the 1800s. And I think that must have been my confusion. But I do believe you are right. I believe this movie takes place around in the 1960s. Definitely has a more rural feel. And one of the other elements I do want to tackle. Marco Beltrami is a very good composer, especially when it comes to horror themes, and I think he definitely gets the job done with this score. Did you enjoy the score for this movie, John?
Agree. I think in horror movies, especially movies like this, like supernatural kind of religious horror movies, kind of like the less you notice that the movie is scored, the more that it feels natural in the scene, the better it is. And Marco Beltrami, I found, throughout my experience with horror movies, has been the go-to guy in this genre. He'll always deliver exactly what you want. And he scored the Scream movies and this, so he can do it all. I think he's got a real knack for delivering a theme into a horror movie that's specific. So he was the right guy for the job.
John, I've pretty much said everything I've wanted to say throughout my notes. Is there anything you want to tackle before we head into final ratings for this film?
Yeah, the one other thing, and then no spoilers, but we've had 3 movies with Valak. Valak's powers, there's no origin story, which right?
Yeah.
The Nun 3, the beginning is coming. We don't know what's going on. We don't know where Valak came from. I know who Valak is in the greater mythology of demonology. It is a real thing outside of the Conjuring universe, whatever. But the powers of Valak seem really overpowered. Like, even in the opening of this movie, it's established that Valak is like a very powerful, like Professor X level telekinesis person, which begs the question: why doesn't Valak just wipe the floor with everybody?
Yes,
it never happens. Like, if Valak is able to suspend a man in midair and let him on fire, do it to everybody.
Yeah. The fact that Valak is thwarted by just a group of young nuns and one other guy in this movie is kind of crazy when you think about all the things that like you said, like Valak seems like this master of like the Force, and like you should not be able to touch him, and then suddenly just until his powers just essentially. I guess until he decides, you know what, I'm not going to use my powers because I want to make this fair, which is kind of silly when you think about it. John, we review movies on a scale here of 0 to 10 videotapes. 0 is awful, just a truly atrocious experience, and 10 is wonderful masterclass work of cinema, and one that you will be remembering for a long, long time. If you were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10, what would you give it?
Unfortunately, The Nun kind of falls in one of those categories where it's like, it's not so bad that it's entertaining in a bad way, and it's definitely not good. It's kind of forgettable. So for me, I'd say it's right in that 4 out of 10 category. Like, I saw it. I can talk about it, but I probably won't go back to it unless I'm forced to.
I'm going to keep this rating up because I am right there with you. I would also give this a 4 out of 10. This is a fairly bad horror movie for me. Yeah, like I said, there were some interesting technical aspects, and it's not like I would not say this is like a truly atrocious piece, like a truly atrocious horror movie, but there's nothing really that stands out. And there's, yeah, like you said, there's no real reason to go back and see it. Unless you are a diehard fan of this franchise, I don't think there's really any real reason to go and see this in theaters. When October comes around, maybe check it out if you find it streaming on HBO or something. But yeah, like John said, this is not that great of a movie and actually quite a bad movie. Well, I say we just jump right into our second movie we will be reviewing tonight, and which John has also seen. So he will be reviewing with me Bottoms, directed by Emma Seligman. This is her second film after her 2021 film Shiva Baby, which also starred Rachel Sennett. She also stars in this movie, as well as she also co-wrote the screenplay with Emma Seligman. This movie is about two high schoolers played by Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri. They are essentially the losers of their school. They're trying to they're two lesbians trying to attract women, but no one wants to give them attention because they're just known as the butt of all the jokes at their school. They decide that in order to defend themselves, because they realize that people at their school are starting to get more violent, they decide to start a women's only fight club in the gym, and essentially in order to create the ruse, in order to essentially attract more women to eventually make them fall in love with them. John, have you seen Emma Seligman's other movie? And if you haven't, or if you have, what were your feelings going into this film, John?
I have seen Shiva Baby. I believe I described it as Uncut Gems for beginners because it's the same. It's the same type of tension, just way lower stakes. Shiva Baby was fantastic. Short movie, to the point. It's just, Jewish tension ramped up to 11 for like 80 minutes, which was great, or 77 minutes, however short that movie was. I enjoy Shiva Baby a ton, and Rachel Sennett is a light, I'll say, because I loved her in Bodies, 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 and Shiva Baby, and this.
No, yeah, Shiva Baby is one of the movies of this decade so far that has just kind of eluded me. I really should watch it because, one, like you alluding it to Uncut Gems, I really, really love Uncut Gems, and I love movies that make me feel like super tense and super like anxiety driven. And yeah, like you yeah, exactly. And I also loved Rachel Sennett in Bodies, 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 as I loved her here, as I really liked this movie as a whole. You don't get a lot of like really obscene high school comedies nowadays, but when you do, I really tend to like it. And this is maybe, like, I saw one of our good friends, Jake Meltzer, kind of describe this as, this is what Mean Girls was to Gen Y, this is to Gen Z. And I think that's a really great comparison, even though I do think this movie is a lot more over the top than Mean Girls. And that is something that I really want to applaud about this movie. This movie is just the right amount of over the top without seeming annoying. Like, as you're watching this movie, this is not a realistic portrayal of high school by any means, even though there are some things that do kind of feel a little close to home. This is definitely a very over the top version of that. Whether it's the fact that the football players in this movie are like viewed as by gods in this film, whether it's the fact that the teacher played by Marshawn Lynch is openly just reading like Playboy magazines on his desk. Like, it's always just going for the most over the top joke. And I really, really appreciated that most of the time. John, did the humor as a whole work for you in this movie?
Yes. I think the best thing about Bottoms is you're clearly in like a step away from reality parody universe, never references it. Like, you're in this ultra patriarchal chauvinistic world referenced by even there's a ton of Easter eggs in the background. Everything you look at is like men good, women bad, the entire movie. And these people live in this universe they never make a mention that it's not reality, which I think is the most brilliant movie.
Yeah, no, I like if you've seen the trailer, there's a scene where they're calling up PJ and Josie, who are Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri's character. Rachel Sennett plays PJ, Ayo Edebiri plays Josie, and you just hear on the announcer where they just say, can the two untalented and unfunny gays come up to the front office? Like, in no way would any school ever say this, but it's just funny that they're just referred to that. Like, I can definitely see if you don't have like a mean-spirited sense of humor, this movie could totally rub you the wrong way. And there was at one point one scene, which I'll get into later, that I think does take it a step too far for me. But overall, I really did like this movie's sense of humor. And yeah, like you said, just there are certain things in the background. Like there's one point where they go to a diner, and the diner is called But I'm a Diner, which I'm assuming is a reference to But I'm a Cheerleader, which I found that really, really funny. But yeah, the cast all around is incredible. Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri are great as the leads. Rachel Sennett is definitely like the more confident and more like extroverted one of just saying like, come on, we got to do this. We got to be the ones to set up this fight club. Like in the first day, she's like, yeah, we're going to be doing elbow throws. We're going to be practicing knife skills. And that's funny. And Ayo Edebiri is like the one that's always like super nervous and like the one that no one assumes, which is funny when you hear like when her character is introduced with like the biggest lie that I think you could ever like establish. Like no one would ever believe that this character actually went to juvie, like she said, but she sells it so well, and I really love that. And yeah, there were other like all the members of the supporting cast I think is great. I already alluded to Marshawn Lynch. Put this man in more comedies because he starts out as the teacher that like doesn't care, and then he's like, yeah, man, I'm an ally, women for life. And then my favorite character is Ruby Cruz, who kind of plays like who plays Hazel, who is PJ and Josie's like kind of third wheel to their friend, the one who's like kind of the more responsible one that sort of runs the club and keeps track of everything, but she just wants to be liked and doesn't get the respect that PJ and Josie want from her. What was your opinion on the cast as a whole, John?
Yeah, everybody you mentioned so far, great. It was Hazel, great with explosives. Comes up a lot in the movie. Also, I would mention, like, because I don't think anybody's mentioned yet, Miles Fowler, who plays Jeff's friend Tim Funk. Yeah. Over the top in like a great way. And Marshawn Lynch's outtakes and Miles Fowler's outtakes are fantastic. I love him as like the sycophantic second, the conniving one, because Jeff, the main male character, is just a vapid, so dumb. And this guy's the brains that orchestrates all the bad things that happen to the main character, as you have in a normal teen sex comedy. And like I think you compared this to Mean Girls, or Jake compared it to Mean Girls. I think this is more of just like a gender swap Superbad kind of, or half gender swap Superbad, because the girl love interests are still girls, but the guys are now girls. So I think that it's definitely more in the vein of Superbad, but in a fantasy universe that never acknowledges it's a fantasy universe.
From a style perspective, the movie this reminds me the most of, I'm not sure if you've seen it, this reminded me of Booksmart quite a bit. Like, but I think it's even more over the top version of Booksmart. The character of Hazel honestly kind of reminded me of a more subdued version of Gigi in Booksmart, where she'll just show up at random points just to say like, hey guys, how y'all doing? And she just wants to be liked by everyone, but like no one seems to give her the time of day, which is just it's sad, but it's kind of funny, and I really appreciated that. The
other girl in the group, the one that's just like totally amped all the time and is always talking about like killing her father. I figured her name Ella. Like she's fantastic too. Like every time she shows up, and even in the slow motion stuff, she's just like screaming. Like she's dressed like Jason Mewes and screaming all the time. She's great.
There's one character, like John said, her name is Ella, and she joins the fight club, and the first day she says, I want to join this fight club because I want to kill my stepfather, because I want to kill my stalking stepfather, which is just like, it's so messed up, but just so funny with how straight it is played. And her character is there's never a moment where she like comes down to reality. She's like, no, I'm the person that's always going to be 80 miles per hour in this movie, and she never lets off the gas, and I really loved that. There's
the girl that's the what do you call it, like a showgirl. Well, she's like a car model, Stella Rebecca, and like they do there's the fundraiser scene, which I won't spoil, is they go like all out in that scene, and they never acknowledge what's really happening in that scene, which I think is just brilliant. Like every big scene is over the top but understated at the same time, so that you convince yourself, is that really not happening? But it actually is happening, and that's why this movie is hysterical.
No, this movie has a really great balance of tone as a whole, with the exception of one scene for me. Without spoiling anything, there's a scene where Jeff's friend wants to really expose that this Fight Club isn't a real thing, and the reason as to why PJ and Josie are using it. So essentially, he sicks one of the top like wrestlers at the school on one of the friends. This was the moment for me where I was like, okay, I think you took it a little too far. Like, it starts out as a funny idea, but when you see just how messed up this wrestler gets and just completely pulverizing this one character, I was like, this went from funny to, okay, now I'm a little disturbed because of how young these characters actually are. And that was the one point in the movie where, for me, it really just sort of set in. Did that scene bother you, and were there any scenes that kind of did draw a line a little bit for you?
I don't really think that scene even did, because I feel it was balanced enough. It wasn't like a one-sided. It wasn't like a one-sided like murder destruction. Like there's that. It definitely was a back and forth. I love fight choreography. Well choreographed fight between two teenagers.
It is.
I gotta say, like, it didn't bother me so much. When you have movies like that, where you have like, you know, your protagonist, you have your conniving antagonist. There has to be the moment where the protagonist hit rock bottom. Why not that in this movie? You know?
What I will say, maybe the scene as a whole didn't bother me. It's when you finally see the aftermath was the moment where I was just like, okay, this movie has been like disturbing and funny. This is no longer funny to me. This is just disturbing, and now I'm just sort of like, what's going on? Which is weird when you consider the ending of this movie, which is completely dialed up to 11.
They will top it.
And they top it, but for some reason I thought the tone was a little bit more realized in that one, where like you have characters like setting off bombs in the finale at like a football field, and like I don't want to spoil what happens, but like a lot of stuff starts happening, and it starts getting more wild. So I was just like, why did this scene bother me? And I think it was just because and I think it was just that tonal inconsistency was a little bit there. One other thing that what I thought was going to be a negative with this movie that honestly I think the movie kind of averted. There was a moment in the movie where Josie and PJ's friendship sort of comes at a halt, and the movie goes into the plot that you have with a lot of these teen movies, where the friends kind of like break up for a while because they have a misunderstanding and they go their separate ways. But this is resolved so quickly that I really wanted to give Emma Seligman a lot of credit for, because that could have been like a really annoying part of the movie that I think it gets over really, really quickly. Did you have an issue? Did you have a fear when that happened in the movie, and did you think that it was handled well?
I think it was handled fine. I think given like the runtime of the movie, like it's not an extremely long movie at all, but like it is the same old, and I'm not saying this in a negative way. It's the same old arc that all these movies, these teen sex comedies follow. Every movie has the scene. You go back to American Pie, you go to Superbad, you go to all these movies. There's always a scene where like the dudes or the girls, the main characters, have a rift and they get back together under the common theme of, you know, getting laid, which happens in this movie. So it's totally fine. I don't mind a little bit of color by numbers when it's done in a fresh way, which this movie does.
No, yeah, cliches as a whole don't always bother me. There are just those certain cliches that I do kind of roll my eyes around, like during a romantic comedy when the characters just break up just to break up, or like in a movie where like a character's been lying the whole time and you finally realize that they're lying and you know they're going to be forgiven in the end. But you got to go by the paint by numbers. This movie kind of has that, but I do think it is averted quite well. I think I've pretty much said. Oh, one thing I do want to spotlight about this movie. Movie has a phenomenal soundtrack. Like not even like movies that are like pinnacles to Gen Z, but just songs that are just used in a really funny way. I think of songs like "And I Need to Know Tonight" or "Complicated." Like "Complicated," especially, like that is the one that I think people are going to remember the most from this movie. Did you like the soundtrack, John?
Yeah, I believe it's "Total Eclipse of the Heart," right? That you're referring to. Like that was a great scene. Because it has not been used that well since Urban Legend. And then you're right. The Complicated. Yeah, every time you hear a familiar song that's been used before, it's being used in like a subversive kind of way in this movie, but it fits. And that's another like small piece of brilliance that Bottoms brings with it, I would say. I agree with you 100% on that point.
No, absolutely. I usually, when it comes to movies like this, I like it when you get like a soundtrack that really captures like the feel and the sound of a movie. And I think this one has a great one to accompany it. I think those are all my thoughts on this movie. Is there anything you want to say before we get into final ratings?
And if you do go see this movie, you haven't seen it yet, stick around. There's tons of stuff during the credits for you. If you like the whole 80s Zucker style outtakes, they got so many of them, and you will. If you didn't love Marshawn Lynch from Beast Mode, if you didn't love him from Skittles commercials, if you don't love him after Bottoms, you're not human, and you should go see a doctor.
Put Marshawn Lynch in more comedies. This guy is hilarious. Yeah, I agree with everything John says. But yeah, if you were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, what would you give this movie?
Now, before I even say anything, I might watch this movie again and it might lose its luster, but I walked out of that theater thoroughly lit on this movie. 9 out of 10. It was so fresh and entertaining for me that I had never really seen anything like it. The novelty hit me hard, so I got to go high. It was a great experience. If you love comedies, if you love coming of age teen sex roms, Bottoms it will be new for you. Go see it.
Yeah, 9 out of 10. That is an excellent rating. I think I'm going to go a little lower than you, and I'm going to go 8.5. I think this is a great comedy. One of the funnier movies that I think I've seen this year. I think Emma Seligman knocks it out of the park. Rachel Sennett and Ayo Edebiri really are just such so fun as the lead characters. Ayo Edebiri just having a moment this year, whether it's in movies with Theater Camp and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, as well as on TV with The Bear. She is just having an excellent moment right now, and I think everyone's just
She took over on Big Mouth, I believe. She took over Jenny Slate's character on Big Mouth.
Right?
Her voice sounds like Jessie, or not Jessie. Whatever her name is, I forget. Not Jessie, the other female character of the show, Missy. She's like Missy when she talks, which is great.
Yeah, and she's excellent. And yeah, so many great. Like you said, the actual fight choreography with this movie being about a fight club is actually really fun and also really well directed. I think Emma Seligman honestly kind of directs action really well, especially when you look at it from a comedic point of view. If you can see this in theaters, go and see this in theaters. There are certain moments, even just the smallest jokes that just had me just dying of laughter in theater. And I would highly recommend this movie.
Yeah, and I will say kudos to the stunt performers, because usually when you have good fight choreography, you have good stuntmen and women. I didn't sit there and read the names off, but whoever did that, excellent work to you guys and gals. You did great in that movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, we always appreciate good stunt work here. But yeah, John, thank you so much for joining me today on Cinemaster's Review. We do have one more review tonight, but you unfortunately have not seen that. Before you head out, is there anything you would like to plug?
Well, if you're already on the video store, stick with the video store. This is where we have Why We Love Horror every week. We have Why We Love Horror Trivia Live every Thursday night. This Thursday night, we're going to have our title match between Jeremy Potters and Louis Boos. Check it out. It'll be 6 p.m. on Thursday. Other than that, TLU drops every weekend. You'll see me hosting there as well. Payson plays there. You'll see it all. Thank you for watching the video store, and I'm going to throw it back to Payson.
Thank you so much, John. Yeah, everything you just said. John does a ton of stuff for the channel. Watch everything he does. Awesome guy. John, thank you so much. Have a great night. Yep. Thank you once again, John, for joining us. Well, we do have one more review for the night. It's funny. In 1966, Sergio Leone made a movie called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think with the way this review show is going tonight, I think we definitely review movies in this order of the bad, the good, and the ugly, because my third movie that we will be reviewing tonight is My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. This is the third entry in the My Big Fat Greek Wedding franchise. The first film, coming out in 2002, was made for very, very little money. I think it is the highest grossing movie that never reached ~1 at the box office, just because so many people kept on going to see it. It followed the character of Tula Portokalos, who comes from a Greek family. She meets a teacher by the name of Ian Miller, played by John Corbett. They fall in love. Her family decides to get in the wedding. Not a ton of conflict happens, but it's just a really charming movie where you just see Ian just sort of accepting Tula for her family, and you see Tula accepting Ian just because he's not Greek. So yeah, really charming movie. Got nominated for an Oscar, the screenplay did, which is maybe a little confusing for the time, but I think when you watch it, you're just no, this was kind of a moment in time when just you could just make a really charming movie and it could get recognized by the Academy. I think that's really, really cool. My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2 is awful. It's about as lazy of a sequel as you can make. It's set 14 years later, maybe the biggest, like one of the biggest cash-ins I think I've seen ever. I literally just watched it this week, and I was just boggled by mind by how lazy the concept of it. We learned that all of Tula's family businesses are starting to fail, except for their old restaurant, just so that way you can have the nostalgia of that. Tula and Ian's daughter, who is now in high school, starting to become rebellious, or at least a little, not like super rebellious, where it's like a dangerous movie by any means, but she's starting to get annoying by her family as well. And the wedding in that movie is Tula's parents need to finally get married for the first time, because it turns out that Tula's father, while sending in his DNA to prove that he is a descendant of Alexander the Great, turns out that he was never legally married to his wife. So they decide to have a big fat Greek wedding again. Going into my big fat Greek wedding 3, my whole thought was, okay, this movie can't be worse than the second one. It can't be more lazy. At least we're finally going to Greece. We have a little bit of an emotional element, because the actor who played Tula's father, Michael Constantine, unfortunately passed away, I want to say 2 years ago. So the movie's kind of made in sort of his remembrance. So it's like, okay, this is probably going to be a fairly respectful tribute to him. I'll give the movie credit. It's not disrespectful by him by any means, except for the fact that it is a little disrespectful because this movie is garbage. There's really no nuanced way to say it. This is honestly, I thought the second movie was awful. This is even worse, and I'll give it credit. It's not as much of a lazy, phoned-in version as the second movie. It's mainly just bad because it just makes poor choice after poor choice after poor choice. For one, I think just one of the major negative elements of this movie is this movie, for the first time, is directed by Nia Vardalos, who plays the character of Tula throughout the franchise. This is the first one that she directed, and she had never directed a movie beforehand. I can actually check that just to make sure. I don't want to be speaking out of turn, but I believe this is her directorial debut. If you just give me one quick second. But yeah, this is because she had not directed either My Big Fat Greek Wedding or My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. This is the first time where she officially took the reins, and you can tell this is made by someone who is not a very experienced director, because so she made one other movie in 2009 called I Hate Valentine's Day. So this is her first movie in 14 years, and yeah, this is you can tell this is a movie made by someone that's not very experienced, because certain scenes are just added just for like a cheap laugh, and it's not even like a really big laugh. It's just something that would get like a chuckle out of an audience, and you don't really understand why. Characters are added just randomly. Like at one point when they get to Greece, Tula realizes that there's just this weird guy that's just kind of like stalking her, and she sort of mentions to Ian like, hey, there's this handsome guy that's like just kind of following me. Turns out that character is her brother, so haha, funny. She was attracted to her brother for a second. Yeah, that's just there. The setup to get to Greece, it's not like 20 minutes in, okay, the characters decide to go to Greece and then we're in Greece. No, by the time the movie starts, the characters have already decided they're going to go to Greece, and it starts in Chicago like the movies normally start. 5 minutes later, we learn that the characters are going to Greece, and 2 minutes later, we are in Greece. Like, that is how fast this movie goes. The movie has an hour and a half runtime, and it's packing so much. It sounds like it's packing a lot into it, but this movie has such little plot that it's stretching certain things out and adding such unnecessary things that it just makes you wonder, is there anything really that is of substance in this movie? And yeah, there really isn't. This movie has two major plot lines. One, they are going to Greece in order to meet the friends and the connections of Tula's father. And when they get to Greece, they realize that all of them essentially have gone away and moved away from Greece. Even though they all grew up in this little town together, as well as we learn that Paris, Tula and Ian's daughter, is coming back from college. Some conflict seems to be going on with her college. I wonder what's going on. I wonder why her college is mailing her, and why she doesn't want her parents to see these envelopes. Who would guess? As well as just randomly, there's this random guy from Paris's college that just kind of shows up, even though they're not really friends. I think they went on one date, but Paris's aunt decided to Paris's great aunt decided to invite him for no apparent reason, just to, I guess, establish a will they won't they relationship between Paris and this one random guy. You could probably guess what happens with them at the end. Yeah, that's just there for no reason. Everything involving Paris in this movie is just pointless and just totally like just aggravating because you know exactly where it's gonna go. The character starts to go through like a kind of existential crisis, but not like so existential where like it feels like, oh man, we're really gonna struggle watching this. No, it's just safe enough so that way you get just that way you can really appeal to the lowest common denominator. So yeah, really hated that. The character of Nick Portocalis. This is Nick is Tula's brother. I just really want to spotlight this guy because his whole character in this movie, he is just there to get laughs from you because of the fact of how much he shaves. That's his whole that's his whole character in this movie. He's just in certain scenes and he's just shaving. The character's mentioned it a few times, but normally you just see shots of him shaving and it's like, haha, that's funny. No, it's not. Like characters will just be talking and it'll just cut to this character and he's just shaving his face or he's shaving his legs. Points you mentioned, oh, he might be manscaping. So, haha, that's so funny. Just an unfunny movie, like as a whole. These characters aren't charming anymore, unfortunately. Like the characters that we used to like, just that because we had fun hanging out with them. They're now just cartoons of themselves. Like on Andrea Martin, who played Great Aunt Vula, someone who used to be like super like into like the Greek culture and is always the one that would like bring up like the Greek traditions and the Greek voodoo. She's just annoying now. Joey Fatone and the two cousin characters, Cousin Nikki and Cousin Angelo, show up towards the end of the second act because Tula needs them to find her father's relatives or her father's friends. They're just there, and you see them go on like this side adventure where they might be just going on their own little vacation. That really goes nowhere. We learn that Tula's father had a relationship with another woman, and they had a son. So like I said, Tula now has a brother, and now he has had a son, and he is now going to be marrying someone who isn't Greek. So yeah, there's a big fat Greek wedding in this movie. And this movie just keeps going on and on until we finally get towards the end where we get the big fat Greek wedding and we see that, oh, it turns out that not everyone did move on from this Greek village. Maybe they were just a little farther down than you would have thought. So yeah, that's just not really likable at all. Whole scenes can be cut that just add nothing. There's this one joke where Ian steps into a shower that's a little cold, and then you hear just him screaming, and then Nick comes up, and he's like, all right, time to take a shower. And then Ian, who's just fully dry now, just comes up and says, hey, you can use this shower over here. And he's like, oh, thank you. And then he screams, does the exact same thing. That goes nowhere. Could have cut that. Could have cut whole characters. Could have cut whole side plots. Yeah, I hate just absolutely ragging on movies like this, but when a movie comes around that is just, to me, this lazy and this by the numbers and this bad, I kind of have to point it out. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going to go a 1. Like, I'll give it that 1 because I think at least it looks nice, but if I were to be honest, yeah, this is an abysmal movie. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to really give like a 0 out of 10 videotapes because that would take a lot. Like, to me, if making a movie is just hard in general, and I kind of see that's why I always just kind of want to give it that half. But yeah, if I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10, this is the lowest I've ever given, and I would give it a 1 out of 10 videotapes. I know I might not seem like the target audience for this. It's not a genre thing. There are plenty of romantic comedies I love. I think just like any movie, as long as if you make it good, I think there's something of merit, and I just don't think this is really of any merit. The only way I could possibly recommend this, if these are characters that you just absolutely adore and you absolutely just love living in this world, maybe you'll find some enjoyment. But even then, I just think the milk jug has just run a little bit empty on this one, as run completely empty on this one. And yeah, I just think it's abysmal, and I don't want to keep rambling. Just awful movie. Just stay away from it if you can. But yeah, that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you all for watching this week's episode of Cinemaster's Review. Remember to like this video. It helps grow our channel, grow this brand a lot, as well as subscribe to the video store. We have new videos coming out every single day. Awesome stuff from a wide assortment of team that really do love movies. Next week, we are going to be reviewing A Haunting in Venice. This is the new Hercule Poirot movie from Kenneth Branagh, as well as The Inventor, which is a new animated movie that I'm kind of excited to check out. But yeah, going to be an exciting show next week. Thank you all for watching, and remember, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.